What's up, gamers? Dreamcastguy here, talking today about the Final Fantasy VII Remake, because today we just got a gigantic piece of new content that's sort of hinting towards the future of Final Fantasy VII. So today we're going to be talking a lot about spoilers of the original games, the sequels, the prequels. We got to talk a lot about the different facets of Final Fantasy because something big is about to go down. So this video is going to be completely filled with spoilers. Brace yourself. But now let's get into it. Obviously, Final Fantasy VII is my favorite game of all time. I've beaten the original one probably 100 different times, going through it again and again, getting the materials, beating the optional bosses, loving every single second of it. But the remake, clearly they want to try and take things in a different direction. That was obviously the intention from the very start, from its action-y focus to its better cutscenes and stuff. Obviously the idea is to expand the lore and, well, honestly, in a way, try and improve the universe. But some of the changes it seems like they're going to make have me a bit concerned. So let's start things off by just talking about this new piece of DLC. Today they released episode Intermission. This is basically this new 3 or 4 hour chapter where you play as Yuffie. And honestly, it's fantastic. Yuffie herself fights very differently from the other characters we had a chance to try out. She's able to use like an interesting mix of long range and short range, getting up and using her ninjutsu to throw kunai or sometimes just stab people in the face, or just doing things like slinging the magic we already know and love. But here's what really kind of struck me about this, is that Yuffie is very much a stranger in Midgar. Like, I think that's one of the most interesting things about the writing of this was the fact that I think we're all kind of used to the idea of Shinra as this omnipotent presence. They're these godlike entities. They rule the world pretty much. They have Mako reactors from sea to shining sea. So getting a chance to see an outsider, somebody like Yuffie who grew up in Wutai, hearing her language when there's no other Shinra people around, just getting a chance to hear her talk when there's no other like Midgar citizens around, just hearing her kind of express herself honestly and freely about how awful Midgar actually is was an interesting touch. But more than that, it was also just fun to see this cool extra mission. But here's where things got a bit strange. So if you have not played Dirge of Cerberus, this was a third-person shooter set in the Final Fantasy VII universe, and it's a bit mixed. Some people kind of hate it, some people completely love it, but it introduced some extra characters called Nero and Weiss, and this organization called Deep Ground. Now, Deep Ground was basically even more advanced super soldiers. The original idea behind it was that people who had joined the soldier program and had been, like, mutated by Mako and stuff, well, some of them get injured, and so they would go to Deep Ground to be repaired, to get like experiments done on them to make them stronger, faster, and hopefully fix their lives. And now it's kind of like this extra secret military police force. They're way more dangerous, they're way more crazy, and that's actually what this organization is. So originally, we didn't see Deep Ground for a very long time in the original versions of these storylines, so it seems like the developers are kind of just trying this time around to basically introduce them more early on, so it doesn't seem like this random surprise organization that just pops up in the second game. So I think that this is a good choice, but it is strange to see these guys like Nero and Weiss, because these guys are just so freaking strong. Like, the fact that they're here is very, very strange, and battling against them, of course, we get utterly decimated. They're the last boss of this freaking DLC, and it ends up causing the death of Sonon. Bringing them into the universe now and really kind of shining a spotlight on them seems like an attempt to basically show us that the FF7 landscape, all the stuff happening on this planet, it's much more chaotic than just Sephiroth versus Cloud. There's a lot of different layers to this conflict. I also think that's part of the reason they're bringing on just Deep Ground now is because I think that they're trying to better establish the theme of that old Chinese phrase that if you seek revenge, you must dig 2 graves. Basically meaning that, of course, you must die in order to kill your enemies sometimes. That a piece of yourself is given up if you just pursue these conquests of revenge so much. And that's definitely what happens to Sonon. We see his backstory. His sister is killed, basically trying to protect her family against a gigantic Shinra mech gone haywire, and now, in his effort to try and protect Yuffie, he is killed by Nero himself, showing that if you battle against Shinra, 99% of the time, you're gonna end up in a coffin. These themes of cost and consequence definitely feel different, but I'm not completely against them. I'm kind of curious how these more serious storytelling elements play out in the second, third, and fourth, and however many parts of the FF7 remake we get. But let's talk about the ending. So after you actually finish the last boss, after you watch the credits, there is basically a 5-minute long trailer for the next Final Fantasy VII Remake. I mean, that's basically what it is. It shows the characters going towards Kalm, which is a tiny town just on the outskirts of Midgar, and it actually gives us some pretty solid hints about what the next game is going to be. And this is the biggest thing. I think that Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2 is actually going to be open world. I mean, the fact that they show us these gigantic sweeping maps, they show us multiple times where it shows the characters looking out across huge empty environments. I think that they're basically telling us that the next game is shockingly going to be fully open world. Now, to me, this would be very, very great, and I think it's going to actually establish the size and scope of this very, very big story. But more than that, we had a chance to see a huge plot twist. Zack is alive. What? Now, Zack is very famous for a particular reason, which is that he dies to save Cloud in the events of Crisis Core. And honestly, he was an incredibly good character. He's witty, he's charming, he's the guy who carries the Buster Sword before he hands it off to Cloud. And him being alive here seems to have caused a lot of confusion and debate. I still think that there's actually a secret to this that they're telling us, but in a more subtle fashion. I don't think that Zack is alive in our universe. I don't think that Zack is alive in the main timeline, and there's a reason for that. So originally when Zack died in Crisis Core, it is a very, very beautiful, very depressing scene where he's basically looking up at the clouds as he's bleeding to death in the rain. Well, here's my thoughts on that. In our universe, it's showing all the characters going towards Kalm, when suddenly, as they approach it, they're hitchhiking, and suddenly, as they get out on the road, it starts to rain. And they make a point to show that they're just staring up at the clouds, and they think, wow, what a nice little rainstorm. And Aerith mentions that she has her stomach in knots, like she's suddenly nervous. And this is actually very important because it's telegraphing what's actually going on from the original Final Fantasy VII Remake. Because remember, when they were leaving town, Aerith is able to see this ghostly vision of a very wounded Zack and a very wounded Cloud limping towards Midgar, and they walk right through her. Now, I think what's going on here is that that's still telling us that is an alternate timeline. That is a timeline where Zack did not die. That is a timeline where Zack actually wins the battle that killed him. And here's my thought. The reason why I think that is because in the original ending, it showed a bag of chips with Scamp on it. And Scamp is different from the Scamp in our universe, showing us that this is a separate timeline. Things where very subtle choices have caused the butterfly effect. Well, think about that when we see Zack here just knocking on the church door. In this, he actually knocks on the church door and he's hyping himself up and he goes in there to try and find Aerith, and she's not in there. Well, something caught my eye. First and foremost, it's not raining at the church, so that means that either A, they've gotten so far away from the church already that it's raining on the heroes, but it's not raining on Zack, which, is definitely a possibility. But additionally, it's making me think that this is symbolism. The fact that he is in the sunshine, he is dry, and now they are in the rain. They are in the timeline where Zack died in the rain. Zack, in this other universe, is a timeline where he managed to survive, and now he's going to this church looking for Aerith. Now here's an additional clue to that. The flowers in the church seem to be a different color. Like straight up, they're actually a totally different color. And I think that this is them basically showing that this is a tiny series of clues. It's pretty unclear what's actually happening at the church as he walks into it, but clearly Aerith isn't there and everybody is crying. So this could actually be two separate things. This could be that in both universes, the Sector 7 plate has fallen and this is all the refugees of it. Or additionally, this might be in a universe where Aerith has died, but somehow Zack is alive, where somehow this is everybody mourning, like a funeral for Aerith herself, and maybe that's why there's these different colored flowers. There's some sort of like memorial that they've placed for her in her favorite spot, which is of course the church. Now both of these paths could be correct, but I think that they're still trying to convey to us that they want to try and do multiple timelines at once. And there was this very strange leak I saw last year, which basically said that in Remake Part 2, Zack is going to be be playable. Now, when I initially read that leak, I kind of just assumed that it would be in flashbacks. I assumed that this would be like a thing where when we're doing the calm flashback and we're seeing all these older events of Cloud and the adventures of his life, I thought that at times we would also get a chance to play as Zack, who of course is going to look and move and control a lot like Cloud. But now I'm starting to think that in Remake Part 2, there's going to be separate events. We're going to see an entire storyline of Cloud and Yuffie and everybody exploring the lands, hopefully going to Junin, fighting the Midgar Zolom and stuff like that. And additionally, we're going to be seeing the further adventures of Zack. Zack in a different universe trying to deal with the troubles of his own timeline. Does he have his own Sephiroth to deal with? Is he trying to find a Cloud? Now, here's my thought. I still think that they're going to end up with Zack being dead in the end. I think that Zack being dead is way too important. It is a major catalyst to the entire universe. Like, I say that as somebody who's not only beaten the games a million times, I own every version of all the games, but I've even read things like in the Final Fantasy VII books, while you're reading these, there's a lot of like internal monologue. There's a lot of chances for the characters to stop and reflect and think of the sacrifices that have been made for them to save the world. And Zack, his death is too important to rewrite. If Zack is actually alive in our timeline, in our universe, that's kind of dumb, because I think that his sacrifice, him passing away in the rain, passing the torch, passing on his life force, so to speak, to Cloud, which leads to them saving the world, that is too vital, too essential, too key to this universe to let it just be rewritten. Final Fantasy VII Remake is very different. It seems pretty obvious that the goal is to try and take this universe into as many different directions as possible, and I'm mostly for that. I think the idea of doing different explorations, different concepts, I'm a big fan of it. But if they start just bringing characters back to life, if they just start rewriting some of the core concepts, I am going to be a bit confused. What if Aerith lives? That's a thought we all have to actually deal with, because if Zack is alive, anything is on the table. But what do you think? Did you get a chance to beat Final Fantasy VII Intergrade? Have you had a chance to watch the ending of episode Yuffie? Or do you not have a PlayStation 5? Tell your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all, and keep dreaming. I put up this little sign that says like and subscribe. Also, I'm sorry I'm so sweaty. My AC is broken. But, oh boy, wow. Man, this is, Zack, I'm going to your funeral, boy. You better stay dead. You better stay dead. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.